take a look at this Twitter conversation that I screenshotted right here. This is from James Cybulski on Twitter. For disgruntled Canucks fans wondering how the Canucks missed out on David Pastrnak, according to John Shannon this morning on the 650 Sportsnet radio, GM Jim Benning put Thomas Gradin and his European scouts' feet to fire for missing out on the Bruins forward 18 months after the 2014 draft. The ensuing replies talk about how Jared McCann was somebody that Jim Benning sincerely liked, at least according to the draft videos on YouTube, and the fact that the Canucks didn't seem to be interested in any of the Europeans, despite William Nylander being pressed on by Thomas Gradin. Thomas Gradin, by the way, is the guy that landed us the Sedins, Alex Edler, I'd like to believe, and Elias Pettersson as well. So, I had a geography field trip today, so on my way to Lynn Valley, which is where we went, I had a good amount of time to think to myself, what if the Vancouver Canucks did pick David Pastrnak? Because if you go back to the 2014 NHL entry draft and you go by the orders of the players, Pastrnak was taken 25th overall in the first round by the Boston Bruins. The Vancouver Canucks, they were at picks number 6 that year. They chose Jake Virtanen, and they were also at pick number 24 in that year, which they chose Jared McCann with. Of course, that being the pick immediately before David Pastrnak. Which means that there were 23 NHL teams that skipped out on David Pastrnak. One of them, Vancouver, they actually skipped out twice. So had the Canucks chosen a guy like Pastrnak, who was taken immediately after, by the way, things would have been a little bit different, of course. He was playing for the Södertälje SK Sweden -1 team, so he was playing alongside of the likes of William Nylander, who also went in this year's draft, and some other guys who didn't actually end up having careers that were notable, but at the same time, Pastrnak was a guy who was playing alongside of Nylander on this Södertälje team, so I don't think it's fair to say that nobody was keeping their eyes out on David Pastrnak. And if we want to talk a little bit about Pastrnak himself, I'd say that he's probably one of the best growers in the NHL today, according to when he was drafted, where he was drafted, and how long it took him to adjust and become a superstar in this league. Finishing things off with 80 points this season, 70 points last season, and a whopping 26 points in the season before that, he's really stepped up into becoming a fan favorite over there in Boston. And the fact that he is now second in that draft class of 2014 in terms of points with 203, only Leon Draisaitl is ahead of him by 4 points, and the fact that he is now first in goals from the 2014 NHL entry draft with 94, that is a 19-goal lead over Leon Draisaitl. It cements David Pastrnak as definitely one of the best players, if not the best player, coming out of this draft. This draft, of course, you got Reinhart, Larkin, Ekblad, Ehlers, Arvidsson, William Nylander, Jake Virtanen, Jared McCann, who was taken right before. But David Pastrnak leads the bunch. He is, statistically speaking, the most successful player out of this draft so far. So it leads us all to believe over here in Canuckland, what would have been if we just picked the guy one pick before he was actually selected in real life? Of course, I think one of the biggest things that we would have to address is the idea that the Vancouver Canucks would draft Brock Boeser. And this is a thing that I don't really know how it would go. Because when we drafted Virtanen, we drafted him as a right winger. Okay, he was supposed to be a top 6 kind of guy playing on that right wing. And we got Jared McCann immediately after, one pick before Pastrnak. McCann was supposed to play center. So we were supposed to fill out our center depth with Horvat, McCann. Our left wing was going to be filled by Hunter Shinkaruk, inevitably Sven Berchi, and our right wingers, they were filled out with guys like Jake Virtanen and eventually Brock Boeser in the next year. So if we got David Pastrnak, I'm not sure how things would have progressed entirely going into the future. Because if we added Pastrnak, we would have been in the position where we had 2 solid, seeming to be top 6 right wingers going forward on our team. And I don't know if we would have been in a position to have our eyes on Brock Boeser, because seeing as he was a right wing the next year after, I don't know how the team would have felt about having a whole bunch of right wingers drafted in their first rounds, 3 picks in a row. So, just based off of the idea of what we would have on the team, I'm not sure how that would play out, but if we assume that everything stays the same, okay, the McCann trade never happens, we never get Erik Goodbranson, we're stuck here with David Pastrnak, Jake Virtanen, and Brock Besser the next year. This would be an absolutely filthy pairing to have Brock Besser and David freaking Pastrnak on the same line, seeing as Pastrnak took around 2 years to adjust to the NHL game and become a complete stud. Once again, 80 points this season, 6 points in the last playoff game against Toronto, 3 goals, 3 assists. Oh my goodness, Pasternak's a good player, and having him on the Canucks definitely would have changed the way he progressed. Of course, if he was playing on the Canucks this season, he wouldn't get 80 points, but he would still be pretty good if he took the current Pastrnak, played him on the Canucks. But at the same time, if David Pastrnak developed with the Canucks, he spent 4 years playing for the Canucks instead of the Bruins, who knows how good he would be now. If you want to take a look at science and normal genes and player growth and all that, you could say, yeah, well, he would probably be as or a little bit worse than the player he is now. But at the same time, if he's playing with a Brock Besser, things might be a little bit different than that. But going forward, there is a little bit of a story behind this, a bigger story, mind you. Because if David Pastrnak ends up a Vancouver Canuck, and he ends up having the same historical seasons that he's been having, and he ends up becoming the best player of the 2014 draft as he is today, if he succeeds in that role, then things are way different going into things like Ryan Miller stepping into the lineup. Things are way different in the playoffs the next season. Things become way different as the Canucks get Ryan Miller, he plays well, Horvat comes up, progresses, Brock Besser comes up, progresses. Things are a little bit different. Because I don't doubt the idea that us having a David Pastrnak on our team and not having an Erik Goodbranson. Mind you, we also gave up a pick in that Erik Goodbranson trade as well, so we'd probably have a second rounder in one of the preceding drafts as well. That's pretty good. So if you take everything into account, what do we got? Okay, in additions, we got ourselves the same. Bo Horvat, Besser, and whatnot. Alright, that's cool. We also got David Pastrnak instead of McCann. And if this happens, Jared McCann literally doesn't get traded from the Canucks to the Panthers because Jared McCann isn't the Canuck in this scenario. There is no attitude problem going on with Jared McCann in the Vancouver locker room, thus there is no need for the Canucks to go out and trade McCann for Erik Goodbranson. What does that translate into? Okay, that translates into another open defenseman spot for any one of our defensemen in that year. I want to propose this specific scenario because Goodbranson's supposed to be a big, heavy, physical kind of defenseman. You know who else was a big, heavy, physical kind of defenseman that was playing for the Canucks in this year? Nikita Trampkin. Yeah, guys, I'm bringing this boat back, because if Erik Goodbranson, granted he didn't play that much this year, but he played 30 games and was injured a lot. I want to bring up the point that if Erik Goodbranson didn't play, we would have much more room for some of these other defensemen to develop, the younger guys in particular. Nikita Trampkin, he possibly could have played a little bit more, and then guys like Evan McEnany, who played 1 game, he probably could have gotten another game or 2. Philip Larson might have been able to play a little bit more. Troy Stecher we would have been able to see more of. So, all of this combined with a David Pastrnak on our team would have made the entire team considerably better. If you take a look at everything we got, Brandon Sutter, 81 games played, okay. Bo Horvat, 81 games played and 50 points, okay. The Sedins, 50 points, okay. You got yourself Ryan Miller in net, who posted a .914 save percentage playing on this bad team that year. Things would have been so weird if we wanted to take a look and see how they would have progressed. And who knows? Because Jared McCann, when he stepped into the Vancouver Canucks locker room and he stepped into the lineup, he was a player who was able to snipe some pretty nasty goals. But 1 season was all it took for us to say, yeah, no, we're sending you over to Florida. And in return, we get Erik Goodbranson, the rest is history. So, it's just weird. Of course it's weird. I'm trying to bring up a what-if scenario here, and I know there isn't really a point to this video, but the thing on Twitter really sparked my interest. It was piquant to me, the idea that Jim Benning legitimately got pissed off at Gradin and the other scouts a year and a half after the draft for not telling him, yo, why didn't you guys tell me to take Pastrnak? Because really, if you want to look at it that way, shouldn't every single general manager treat their scouting staff from the European leagues like that too, after virtually every good pick that is made from Europe, guys? Victor Arvidsson was taken late in this draft. Was Jim Benning getting pissed off at Gradin for not telling him to pick him too? I don't know, it just seems kind of funny to me for Jim Benning to get upset at the scouting staff for not telling him to pick up Pastrnak, when in hindsight literally every other team would be going through the same thing if every other team publicly stated that that happened. And I'm not saying John Shannon is a part of the team, he's certainly around the team a lot, but he's not a Vancouver Canucks general manager or something like that. But anyways, I just wanted to bring up a discussion point. What if the Vancouver Canucks drafted Pastrnak? Everything would be different. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Plus, gaming, and bye.